And you spent, over a decade with the Vikings. And, there was some big moves from Minnesota this past season. They ended up firing Mike Zimmer after 8 and 9 years. What were your kind of thoughts on Minnesota firing Mike Zimmer?
I think nothing personally against him. I think it was time. I think I think the team got stagnant, and there were opportunities that were missed. Um, I think games that they should have won that they didn't win, um, and to be honest, I think they're stuck in a financial crunch with the quarterback. I just, my own personal view is I'm not sure that the quarterback that's going to take us to um, get us through a playoff, get us to a possible Super Bowl opportunity. I don't know if they have that quarterback there, but I know they've invested a lot of money in him, and I think that's going to be tough. And I'm really curious to see, you know, what a new coach will do with that. I mean, obviously, there's not. I don't know how much he can do. I don't know. I don't know if there's trade opportunities. I don't know what you do if you cut him. I don't know how much of the guarantees are there. I think it's a really, really tough situation that I think they created at the quarterback position.
And, you kind of mentioned, with Mike Zimmer, it was kind of time. I'm a big Bengals fan. I kind of felt the same way with Marvin Lewis, a guy who's a good
Mm-hmm.
coach, but just couldn't really get to that next level. And he just, kind of felt like it was time that had to, be fired. And you're talking about, Kirk Cousins, they bring in a new head coach, Kevin O'Connell. He spent times with the Rams on the offense. What are your kind of thoughts on that hiring for getting an offensive-minded coach from Minnesota opposed to, Mike Zimmer like they previously had, who was more so of a defensive-minded coach?
I defense wins championships, and but I think football has become offensively influenced. I think that you need guys that understand and know offenses in order to be productive. Um, it doesn't always carry you over the hump, as far as winning the Super Bowl. That's usually the best defenses tend to do that, or whoever plays the best defense. If it's two offensive guys that are in that Super Bowl, usually the team that plays the best defense usually wins. But I think this is an opportunity. I think maybe the last opportunity for someone to be able to come in and put Kirk Cousins in a situation to where he can play well and take a team to the playoffs. I think I think you have to do that and potentially even play in a Super Bowl to say that this would be a successful season, and or if Kirk Cousins can be the guy.
And when you look at Kirk Cousins, he was drafted in 2012, and I would say he doesn't really have a whole lot of years left. And it's interesting, this quarterback situation with Minnesota, especially getting a new offensive guy. So let's maybe say, Minnesota is kind of in this 8-9 situation again. Who's to say, they don't maybe draft a quarterback early next year to kind of get their, quarterback of the future. That should be really interesting for Minnesota. But you look at their offseason, I think they're one of the more underrated teams this season. They signed Darius Smith. They had a really nice draft.
Mm-hmm.
So you have kind of maybe a record prediction for Minnesota for the upcoming year?
I personally think that I'll say it this way. I think conference-wise, I think that they can battle for 2, 3, maybe second in the conference, maybe third I think they can be up at the top of the conference. Wins and losses, I don't know. I don't know exactly how strong the conference will be as a whole, but I think in that conference, I think that they can be up at the top. I think they can get into the playoffs. I think they're more than good enough to get into playoffs. I think that they could be good enough to maybe go forward. What concerns me is the leadership on the offensive side from the quarterback. That's the scariest piece for me. I think that there's a whole lot of talent, but which is not necessarily the best example because there's very few Bradys. But you see that leadership that a quarterback like that does to a team. No matter what team he goes to, all of a sudden guys want to be around him. They'll play better. And I'm not saying that Kirk Cousins has to be Tom Brady, but he has to be. There has to be some form of that. I don't personally see that kind of leadership from afar. Maybe it is. Maybe he does that. And I don't want to make this a total rant about him, but I just think that the leadership piece of this and the quarterback spot and the offensive side is all led by that specific guy. That is the quarterback. You get all the credit, but you have to be, there's also the blame that comes with that.
And you look at the Vikings compared to the Packers, I think the Vikings have a much better roster than the Packers. But like you're saying, the difference between them is just the quarterbacks.
Yes.
Rodgers makes the Packers great with a horrible roster, and Cousins is, barely taking this Minnesota team to the playoffs with a very, very underrated roster. And that's really the main thing to me that kind of separates these two teams, because if they just had a slightly better quarterback, the Vikings, to me, I think they could very well end up winning the NFC North this year. But when you're playing against arguably the best quarterback in the NFL, it's kind of hard to do that when your quarterback's very consistent, as in Cousins.
You're exactly right. I think, again, when you look at the teams, go around the league, when you look at the quarterback and look at the team, it usually reflects the quarterback, because that is the guy. They could have a great defense. They could have an average defense. But if you've got a great quarterback that's a leader who's been around, who understands the game, you're competitive. You've got a shot. You're a team that somebody's thinking, might be in the playoffs, just because you've got that quarterback.
Yeah, I've told people before, like when you look at wins and losses, I feel like at least 85 to 90% of the time you look at the team who won, they're going to have the better quarterback. It's not a coincidence when you see, Brady's and, Rodgers, people like Russell Wilson, who have been some of the best quarterbacks in the league for a decade, that they're winning and they have the best quarterback as well. You see these teams like, let's say, Tennessee with Tannehill or, Cousins, teams who have an all right quarterback, but they're not on these levels because they don't have a great quarterback like some of those other teams.
And the crazy thing about it is you got to pay them according to the pay scale. When those contracts come up, in order to keep them, you have to pay them on the pay scale of those quarterbacks who are great. And now you've got money vested in them, and now you don't get to where you want to go. What do you do? And when you start talking guaranteed money, that's money that you can't just let go. You got to try to find a way to get that player to play.